I'm Morgan Barry with Spotlight on Environmental Health, and this show is about wood smoke. For many of us, including me, a wood fire is ambiance and warm hearth comfort. But now we know it can also be a hazard to health, especially for those who have respiratory illnesses like asthma. So this information might be hard to hear or even confusing, because how can something that's been so much a part of our lives for centuries, millennia really, be harmful? And what are we supposed to do about it? To help answer these questions, we have Mike Schultz from Puget Sound Clean Air Agency and David Williams from Public Health Saddle and King County Environmental Health Division with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thanks, Morgan.
And Mike, could you tell us a little bit about what Puget Sound Clean Air Agency is?
Sure. We are a governmental municipal agency. We're also a regulatory agency. And in addition, we do a lot of education and outreach work. Our fundamental mission is to provide clean, healthy air to breathe for the citizens of King, Kitsap, Pierce, and Snohomish counties. And we basically do that through two different mechanisms. One is regulatory. And the regulations that we're referring to here are primarily those geared toward and directed toward businesses and industrial operations that emit air pollution. And this is a rapidly shrinking and diminishing part of our efforts.
So your focus is changing from industrial to
what I'm about to get into, which is the second part of our operations, which is more voluntary in nature. And it's sort of the smushy part of our work, if you will, in that it is not as predictable in terms of outcome, and it has to do with a lot of voluntary efforts, getting people to voluntarily reduce air pollution. And that is done through a lot of partnering and collaborative efforts with other organizations, private, public, profit, nonprofit. And what we try to do is influence the decision-making of others to make clean air, to make decisions that are motivated, at least in part, by clean air, for people to recognize when they are making decisions that there may be an air pollution component to this. And we ask them to make a decision in favor of clean air. And the decision makers we're dealing with here are not just government and industrial leaders and business leaders, but also and primarily you and I, us individuals, because we are the ones who are producing and generating most of the air pollution in this area.
So, in fact, what are the biggest threats to clean air?
The winter pollution problem is a fine particulate problem. Very, very small particles that we'll hear about soon from Dr. Koenig and Dr. Rock. And they're going to talk about the scientific and medical end of things. But in general, we're talking about very, very small particles that can't be seen, that can be inhaled deeply into the lungs, and they're easily transported into the bloodstream.
And that comes from?
These come from primarily, and over half of them during the wintertime, region-wide, come from wood stoves and fireplaces. If you start looking at residential neighborhoods, you're looking at 80% and above of all the pollution in those neighborhoods coming from wood stoves and fireplaces.
So to summarize, almost 100% in neighborhoods comes from wood smoke from fireplaces and wood stoves.
Correct.
Whew, that's a lot. David, can you tell us about what public health's role is and indoor air quality?
Sure. In some respects, we're working on the other side of the coin that Mike's agency is working on. We look at promoting healthy environments. Mm-hmm. Generally, we look at promoting those environments within communities, within homes. My work in indoor air looks at individual homes in the residential setting, how people can promote a healthier environment for themselves, for their children, and in some cases for their neighbors. So what Mike's talked about, the particulate matter specifically, wintertime, and the way that is generated and affects whole neighborhoods. I see the part of that when people call up my office or they call public health and are directed to me and have concerns about their indoor environments. Oftentimes that shows up with some sort of respiratory problem. People have concerns about their allergy-like symptoms, or what happens to a lot of people in our county, because 1 in 7 are affected by asthma, is we see an increase in effects on asthmatics. And so they become, they're not really canaries in the coal mine, because there are so many canaries out there, mm-hmm. but the effects of those particulates are fairly dramatic on the community we would call asthmatics. And because there are so many of them, it's important to promote a healthier environment by, number one, reducing the amount of wood smoke in our communities.
You were going to show us exactly how that cycle works. Because
because Mike talks about, his agency deals with ambient air, as it's called, the air that's outside. That isn't primarily our concern, or rather our focus, the way we approach that is by looking what goes on indoors. And unfortunately, the kind of things that come from wood smoke readily just come right back into the home. It's not like the walls in our house magically separate us from the air outside. The air outside is the air that we breathe inside. In fact, at different times, it can be even worse because there's not enough air circulation, and so things concentrate. So what happens in a home is that especially one that burns wood and isn't burning efficiently, and doesn't have a good control of how the air moves through the house, the smoke that goes up the chimney just circulates right back into the home. As much as 70% of that smoke can basically recycle back into the home.
So what happens if my neighbors don't burn wood? Does that mean their air is better because it isn't recycling back into their house?
Oh, that is, if I'm burning wood and my neighbors don't?
Yeah.
Well, that depends on which way the wind blows, of course, but generally, you're not only smoking yourself, but those directly around you. It can have interesting effects in some cases I've looked at, where you have a home that someone's burning wood, not too well perhaps, creating a lot of smoke, and it'll skip a house because of the wind patterns and just land on the house after that. And as Mike alluded to as well, as will Dr. Koenig later, whole neighborhoods can just become these sort of fogs of smoke from a few people burning wood.
Okay, so the smoke goes up the chimney, comes back in
Yep,
my house,
whips right back in.
my neighbor's house, my community house.
And it's important to also recognize that when you're burning wood, you're creating a draw through the house. So that air is leaving, air has to come in.
Right.
And the way it comes in is creating a little negative pressure, and that
So
sucks
that
things
vacuum-
from outside
yeah,
in, like
okay.
the wood smoke that we're putting outside.
Okay, good. Well, we know that wood smoke pollutes the air outside and in, and so that raises questions like what makes wood smoke toxic and how does it impact health? And so to answer those questions, we went out and talked to the environmental health scientist, Dr. Jane Koenig, and also the environmental health physician, Dr. Sandy Rock.
The major sources of air pollution, as people probably can recognize, is combustion. And of course we worry a lot about combustion from mobile sources, cars, buses, and trucks. Everybody kind of knows that those are putting emissions into the air. But combustion of wood is another source that in the western United States is responsible, we believe, for a number of adverse health effects. And the reason that wood smoke is harmful is because, as you can see, the wood burning away here, at the end of the burning cycle, there'll be this residue, there'll be ash. And there's also the products of incomplete combustion that are going out the chimney. And those products of incomplete combustion, the chemistry, this burning of wood or burning of oil or burning of gas, in the process of the burning, it produces a number of chemicals. We think there are over 1,000 different components to wood smoke. And some of them are in the particle form, but not necessarily visible. And some of them are gases. So the problem is burning wood causes air pollution. And we, as a country, spend a lot of time and money and energy trying to reduce air pollution, and yet in our homes we are producing air pollution. The emissions from wood smoke have been studied pretty carefully, and as I mentioned, there are hundreds of components, and some of them are common air pollutants that we regulate in other situations, like carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and gases like formaldehyde that people avoid in other situations if they can. Burning wood produces aldehydes of various kinds, and actually produces some known carcinogens, agents that cause cancer. One of them is benzopyrene, that's been shown to cause cancer in animals, and that is actually targeted as a human carcinogen. So all of these products, along with a whole family of chemicals called PAHs, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, all of these are created by wood smoke. The question of penetration of the outdoor air into the home is one that actually we've been studying here at the University of Washington just in the last couple of years. We had an opportunity to measure indoor, outdoor, and personal exposures to people, and that gave us a chance to calculate penetration of particles into the home. And this has been done in the past as well. But I think in our studies we found that about 74% of the wood smoke particles, it's either 74 or 71.4, of the wood smoke particles that are emitted to the outdoor air find their way back into the home. This particular fire represents what we've been talking about here. This is not a fire that, to any extent, that is a roaring fire that may be consuming a lot of the wood. This instead is a smoldering fire, a very good example of a fire that will produce the greatest amount, the greatest number of pollutants because of the incomplete combustion.
The first time I knew that I was bothered by smoke of any sort was back when my parents used to have parties and they'd crank up the wood fire, and also many of their friends, and they too smoked cigarettes. And I would come down from upstairs, I was probably 9 years old, and complain about it. And eventually they stopped burning both cigarettes and wood in the fireplace. But then years later, I myself burned wood just because, you know, we've grown up with a tradition of having a wood fire in the hearth, and never really thought that much about it until some of my family members started having problems later on. The kinds of problems that people can have from being exposed to smoke of any kind, and here we're talking about wood smoke, but you can also think of tobacco smoke or diesel exhaust, would be obvious irritant factors where your eyes burn, your nose burns, your throat hurts, you may develop a little cough. But the worst thing, of course, that we're concerned about is the effects on the lungs and even the heart from inhaling the fine particles in particular that come from wood smoke. These have been well defined as very small particles. They're about 2.5 millionths of a meter in diameter. We call it micrometers, and we call that PM 2.5. The PM 2.5 fine particles get deep into the lungs and lodge down there, actually, and carry with them a variety of chemicals, probably numbering in the thousands, that are irritant, toxic, and even carcinogenic, meaning cancer-causing. And once they're down there, they generally stay down there. And they lodge up. It's cumulative, and they lodge up against the sensitive tissues, sensitive cells of the deep recesses of the lungs. And this is why we're in particular, no pun intended, but we're particularly concerned about particulate matter, because the fine particulate matter, because it gets down there and can cause so much trouble. Interestingly, by the way, particulate matter 2.5 is so small that it acts more like a gas than like a particle, so it can diffuse into both the bloodstream, and it can also get into your house when you don't even realize that it's getting in there. And because it can diffuse into the bloodstream, it can affect other organs in the body, and one of those is the heart. And we happen to know that people that are exposed to PM 2.5 can develop abnormalities in their heart rhythm, which can lead to problems there too. So it's a very interesting little particle we're talking about here. And we find it in wood smoke, we find it in diesel exhaust, and it's likely in tobacco smoke as well. If you or one of your neighbors is burning wood and there's smoke, either visible or otherwise, emanating from your chimney, then you're impacting yourself and you're impacting your neighbors as well. And even if you can't see the smoke particles are getting into your house, because the fine particles in particular, the 2.5s, get in through the smallest of cracks and crevices around your doors, around your windows, anywhere it can, and you don't necessarily even have to smell it. It can just enter without your being aware of it, and it can still impact your health. So if you have a neighbor that's burning and you don't think that you're getting affected by it, you probably are to some degree. You can be sensitive to it, you can be irritated by it, and worse, you can have health effects from it. If you're just sensitive to it, you may start getting dry, itchy eyes, burning eyes, runny nose, scratchy throat, even a cough. If you're truly allergic to it, which is not that common, you can actually have a full-blown allergic reaction to it, including wheezing and difficulty breathing and maybe swelling up of the linings of your nose and throat. But many people are just sensitive to it, where it's an irritant, it bothers them, and whether we're talking about tobacco smoke or wood smoke, it's pretty much all the same. There's some suggestions now that wood smoke is even worse than tobacco smoke, and we know the dangers of tobacco smoke. You can see from the materials that Clean Air Agency has for you, if you ask for them, that there's a huge amount of particulate matter, PM 2.5, that comes from wood stoves. The best thing to do, if you have to burn at all, is to have, if you don't have gas installed already in the fireplace and you want to have that nice look of the fire sparkling and brightening up the room and giving off a little warmth, is to have a natural gas insert or natural gas logs put in, and which I have in my home, and I enjoy doing it. My daughter and wife and I love sitting in front of it. It's not the same thing as an old wood fire by any stretch, but it still gives me a good sense of sitting before the hearth, but knowing that I'm not polluting us or the neighborhood.
So David, we have just learned how toxic smoke can be and how prevalent it is. So what do you recommend to keep indoor air quality high?
Well, if anyone has respiratory problems in a home, my recommendation is just don't burn. There's some amount of pollution is going to get into the home if you're going to have burning wood or some sort of fuel burning in the home. And secondly, if you're in a situation where it's a neighbor that's causing a problem, my primary recommendation is go talk to the neighbor. Explain your situation. Because what Mike's agency can do for enforcement is go look at smoke. But as we all know, most of the burning that occurs is in wintertime when it's dark and cold. And the regulators can't see smoke at night. Mm-hmm. So you can smell it and you know your neighbor may be burning something. And it's important, I think, for people to feel like they can actually go and talk to their neighbors about that. And we'll give them information to help them maybe convince someone.
Okay.
But that's the primary recommendation. Don't burn in your own home if you have health problems, and don't give your neighbors health problems if you are burning. So.
That's a wonderful thought, that my neighbor would stop burning if I asked them. But what happens if they don't?
We actually have found, as David was saying, is that most neighbors want to be good neighbors, and that if a neighbor does contact them to say, "Here, your smoke is bothering me," we find that at least 90% of the time people stop. But if people don't want to approach their neighbor, if they want to file a complaint with our agency, they certainly can. They can call one of two numbers that will be on the screen at the end of the show, or they can go to our website to file a complaint at www.pscleanair.org. Okay. That also will be on the screen.
So and this I want to interject that this actually, it affects quite a number of people in King County. There are over 22,000 kids in King County with asthma.
Oh my goodness.
And as a rate for when you count all the adults, that turns out to be a lot of people that cover most of King County in the most affected neighborhoods.
And I'm quite well aware that respiratory illnesses are more than asthma, and that during the flu season, people who get the flu have sometimes an asthmatic response. It might go away, but they're really affected by that kind of thing too during the flu and shortly after. So the regulation part is that if I called and I said my neighbor won't stop burning, and my kid has asthma or my mom has asthma and I really am affected by it, and I call the agency, what will happen?
Our operator will take down all the pertinent information about address, name, we initially will send out a packet of informational materials to those people indicating that they have been, there was a complaint, their smoke was bothering somebody, and here's what they can do to prevent that from happening.
Well, if people continue to burn And a lot of people will, of course. What can they do to burn better?
We are right now involved in a very active campaign with one of our valuable partners, the Northwest Hearth Products Association, on a burn smart, burn clean campaign. And there are basically, it revolves around two facts. One is that smoke going out a chimney is unburned fuel.
Oh.
People who burn wood have a lot invested in that fuel. They either paid money for it or put a lot of sweat equity into getting it.
And cutting it.
To throw it out the chimney as smoke does not make sense. And it's certainly not clean for themselves and their neighbors from an air pollution standpoint, as David just talked about. There are three things people can do.
Okay.
That we want. And the nice thing about this program is that regardless of income, regardless of location, where you're located, everybody can do something to burn cleaner if they're burning wood. The first thing is look at the appliance. Can you change over on an appliance? Our agency is a strong advocate of burning gas. We're talking about not just natural gas, but butane, which is available, or propane, which is available almost everywhere.
Okay.
So propane or natural gas appliances are preferred. If you have an older wood stove and you're going to be burning wood, look at upgrading to a certified wood stove. Okay. They can burn a lot cleaner.
And the second?
Second is fuel. We're looking at only burning clean, dry wood if you're burning wood. If you're burning a fireplace, think about burning compressed sawdust logs like Duraflames. They burn a lot cleaner. And finally, operation. If you are operating a wood stove, I don't care if it's a certified wood stove or an old one, make sure you give it plenty of air.
Plenty of air.
Do not starve it for oxygen. Do not let the fire smolder, because if you do, again, it's just creating a lot of smoke, pollution, and your money is going out the chimney.
That's what Jane was talking about, Dr. Jane Koenig.
Right.
So we actually have gone out to talk to a hearth specialist about what the options are.
A traditional wood-burning fireplace has ambience, but very little efficiency and poor emissions. So there are alternatives to that. And on the wood side, you would consider a wood-burning insert or a wood stove. There's also pellets, and in the pellet category, there's pellet inserts and pellet stoves, and then there's gas. And that could be propane or natural gas, and that could be an insert or a stove. And all those 6 choices represent very low emissions and much more efficiency than the open wood-burning fireplace. A traditional wood-burning fireplace is an attractive thing for a home, but it's not very efficient. In fact, it's inefficient. And as well, there's a lot of emissions from wood burning. So one alternative to a wood fireplace is to go to a gas fireplace log. Now, this is not an efficient way to heat a home. This is just an alternative fuel, and it solves only one problem, the emissions problem. A gas fireplace log has no particulate emissions to speak of and would be very good for the environment in that respect. However, if someone wants to heat their home with gas from the fireplace, we have products that do that too. We have gas fireplace inserts and gas fireplace stoves. And these burn gas, have the ambience of a fire, but have the efficiency of a small furnace and are quite low on emissions too, of course, because they burn gas. When you're shopping for a wood-burning stove or a wood-burning insert, you need to make sure you buy a certified stove or insert, because it's against the law to buy one that isn't, and it's against the law to install one that isn't. Certification means the stove was tested by the manufacturer to a federal standard to demonstrate that it passes the standard and is clean and has very low emissions. In fact, Washington State has the toughest standard in the country for certified stoves, and so any stove sold in this state has to pass that standard to be sellable. When you buy a stove from a retailer, the retailer is obligated to sell you a certified stove. However, if you're buying a used stove or a stove from a private party, you may want to be sure to find the certificate or the proof that your stove is certified. There's a lot of responsibility involved with burning wood. You have the responsibility to yourself to be safe and to your neighborhood to burn cleanly. And as you burn wood, you need to remember that there's the consequence of burning poorly is emissions in the environment, which is bad for our health, and also the chance for a chimney fire or for damage to your home. So maintenance and awareness of how to burn clean and burn smart is a critical element of being a wood burner. And if you have questions about this, you can consult the website burnclean.com with some tips for smart burning.
Well, fortunately, there are some options to wood burning. But as I understand it, if we don't take care of our environment, if we burn too much wood, then we might have to have something like a burn ban. And maybe they actually do happen. Is that true?
They do happen every year. And we call a burn ban when a state legislative pollution trigger is met. Pollution concentrations build to a certain point where they reach that trigger, and the air is stagnant. It's not mixing. And so we expect that condition to continue, so we call a burn ban. And what that means is that people with uncertified wood stoves or fireplaces can't burn. And if people want to know if there's a burn ban, they can go to our website. That'll be on the screen at the end of this show. And also, they can call a burn ban number that is on there.
Okay. The radio, does the radio tell me?
And the TV and all
newspaper.
Radio, TV are great sources of information, especially the weathermen on the TV, the weather people on the TV weather news shows.
Okay, so I need to know if I have an uncertified stove, if I have a fireplace, burning wood. If there's a burn ban, I can't burn.
That's correct.
Okay. But a certified stove, I can burn.
You're allowed to burn. We prefer you not burn, but you're allowed to burn.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Do you have any other closing comments? I've really appreciated everything I've learned today.
Well, you know, I think it's important to understand that people are going to keep burning wood. So, as Mike pointed out, we want them to take responsibility for that, burn as cleanly as possible. I mean, we're always going to tell people that if you have an asthmatic child in your house or you have someone with respiratory problems, burning wood is going to affect that. It's going to add a burden to their health. So we're promoting healthy living environments. It means people have to take responsibility for their actions. And we also understand that it's part of a community effect. And people love to burn wood. It's a wonderful, warm, romantic thing to do.
Yes, it is.
But it has a downside. And I think as long as people recognize that, then they'll take care. And hopefully they'll respect the health of themselves and their community.
And Mike?
To help recognize the dilemma that we're in and trying to get people to not burn wood, I think you have to appreciate the history behind it, and that for 500,000 years, man has brought fire into his shelter or home. And in the last 100 years, we've glamorized and created this great aura around keeping the home fires burning of hearth and home, chestnuts roasting on an open fire. We've romanticized this whole thing. And so there's a lot of momentum behind that. And it's a very positive image. It's a very warm, comfortable image. And we're presenting something that's quite different. We're presenting a dark side. Don't do this. It's dangerous, and so on. And so it's a difficult sell, and people need to realize, but we are delivering fact. We're talking medical problems and health issues here. This is a public health problem.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, David. And please stay tuned for websites and phone numbers that you can use for more information on wood smoke. And I want to thank you for joining us today on Spotlight for Environmental Health. I'm Morgan Barry.
Thanks, Morgan.
Thank you.